Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'll be refuting Callie Eastwood on her authoritarian versus permissive parenting, and I'll be challenging her claim of fact today. Today I'll be claiming, her claim of fact stated, and she gave an example of two people, herself and her friend, her parenting skills that her parents gave her, and the parenting skills that her parents gave to her friend. Her parents being more authoritarian and her friends being more permissive, meaning her parents had a little more strong will towards her friends had less. So on her main claim of fact, she stated that authoritarian children act far worse than permissive children. Three of her secondary claims that she used were aggression. It would have a little more aggression and overall, lack of performance in school, and a lack of social skills. So first of all, her first secondary claim was the aggression that children would have. In her speech, she used a reference from Decker and Dodge, stating, where the parental disciplinary actions were carried out in an emotionally charged manner would result in the aggression of the child. I further looked into the research from Decker and Dodge. It was actually dated in 1997. I found that the same study of the research was based on African Americans and European minorities only. And it also stated that it was not appropriate to be actually consisted or associated with middle-class white people. I also, further into the study, I also researched, and the study was conducted out of 558 parents. The study was conducted prior to kindergarten at the age of 5. It stopped after the age of 5 and then restarted again at the age of 11. So it did not clarify what actually had happened within those last 6 years of them doing the study, or if they stopped doing the study. So I do claim to dismiss this fact due to the lack of evidence and the lack of information withheld to clarify the data of this secondary claim. Now her second secondary claim of bad performance inside school, Callie used a study done by the Tehran University in her speech to connect the kids to act poorly in school. From authoritarian parenting compared to permissive. I looked up the schools in Iran. Those of you guys that know, we're actually Americans and we actually live in America. It's a Muslim state, and a lot of their parenting skills and a lot of their parenting, they use their culture and their religion. So I do challenge this claim of fact to actually sit there and be sustainable evidence to actually endure and actually compare to us. So one would be the source is actually outdated over 25 years. Second would be it really has no association with any of the majority of children that are actually in the United States. And third, it lacks the complying evidence to actually be related to what actually their GPA was prior to the study. Now in her third secondary claim, she used the lack of social skills. So Callie claims authoritarian children lack more social skills than permissive children. I claim to dismiss this claim due to the fact of her stating her opinion as a claim, as not enough supporting facts or evidence due to anything to support this claim. So in conclusion, I do conclude and dismiss and challenge Callie's claim of fact that authoritarian parenting makes far worse behaved children than permissive parenting due to the lack of grounds evidence and outdated sources and opinionated facts. This leads to pretty much a fact of my claim of fact that in actuality it's just your child is actually a product of your environment, not just based on your parenting styles, determining what your behavioral outcome of your children will be. And that is my speech.
All right, you set up the structure pretty clearly. I think that you go at this one in a little different way than other people have, but it's a perfectly appropriate way. You're basically challenging the grounds that the advocate's using and whether it is applicable in the cases that they're talking about. And I kind of like the fact that you go after the research that's being presented. You actually go and look at the research and discover, for instance, on that first point, that it's very specific ethnic groups that were evaluated, that they were evaluated in specific time periods in their life, and that the people doing the research suggest that you can't make a generalization from this experience to other particular groups. I think that that's a good piece of information to dig out and show, to suggest that we shouldn't be making any inferences based on this particular information. I also think that you raise a question about the 6-year gap between when they studied them before they were 5 and then after they were 11, and say to suggest that there isn't something important that happens to kids between the age of 5 and 11 that might have affected the outcome here is a little bit strange. And it seems like this study may have been designed to look at particular kinds of changes, maybe onset of adolescence versus what they were in previous. I think you kind of need to explain why this would present a problem, not just say, well, there's a mystery gap here. It's like it's like
because they didn't have that information in that study.
Well, and I think I would just ask the questions or kind of make some assertions on it and say, look, I'm not saying that the evidence is invalid, but it raises these kinds of questions, and since the study has already said these other things, then I think that these are valid questions to ask. So I think that that's a good way to go about that. On the school performance thing, you make an argument that says, look, the example that the advocate used, the research that they used, is based on schooling in Iran, and there are likely to be substantial differences. This is a reasoning challenge that basically says the idea that this would be analogous to our experience here in the United States is problematic because they have different traditions, cultural values, and ways in which they enforce those things. I think that's a good challenge. I do think you need to show a little bit of that. Most people are going to understand that there are differences between the cultures in different countries, and Iran, of course, in particular, because they have a heavily religious, organized society that enforces a variety of rules. And by the way, I think if you wanted to talk about why that's a little bit problematic, you could say, Iran is an authoritarian society, especially at the parental level, is just a reflection of the culture that happens to be there, where, if you're dressed the wrong way on the streets, you get beaten. Big surprise that there are problems with that sort of thing, and that's not the kind of thing that we're talking about when somebody's parents ground them because they didn't get home on time, or they, take away their car because they catch them smoking pot, and they say, oh, shame on you. Oh, you're such an authoritarian. You don't let me do whatever the hell I want. I think that there's a big difference there, and you ought to be challenging, some of the assumptions that the advocate's making on those points. And then the social skills thing, I thought your argument here was underdeveloped. You say she's basing it only on her own experience, which is not a bad challenge to make, but that would be, I think, a good place for you to come up with some counterclaims to suggest that kids that are disciplined when they are young grow up with healthier environments, with respect for others. They are less likely to commit crime, any of those sorts of things. Any of the stuff that talks about why having a disciplined child is a good thing, and that's not hard information to find. I think you could look in almost any, baby book, and say there's a ton of stuff that says, kids need rules, they need guidance, they need to figure out what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, and they continue to learn those things up through adulthood. And parents that don't provide them with that sort of stuff, there are all kinds of problems that these kids have. And I just think that you missed a trick here, getting some counter evidence on that point and making a stronger argument there. All right, thank you.